Welcome to Breathe, a weekly audio podcast presented by Breath of Life. And now, here's the host, Pastor Julian Snell, and co-host David Person.
Welcome to Breathe. I'm David Person, and I'm the co-host of this podcast. And of course, the host is Speaker Director of Breath of Life, Pastor Julian Snell. He is the senior pastor of the Oakwood University Church. Now, normally I would say, "How are you, Pastor Snell?" But he's not here. I faked everybody out, Christian. He's not here. As you may know, Pastor Snell has been in the Middle East. He and his wife, the First Lady of the Oakwood Church, Gianna Snell, and their children, they've been in the Middle East along with a contingent from Oakwood University and Breath of Life supporters and just a nice group of folks. If you follow them on Facebook, you've seen some amazing photographs that's chronicled their journey. So Pastor Snell is not with us today because they're still trying to make their way back to Huntsville, which is where our studios are here for Breathe. So it's just me today in the studio, but I've got at least on this side of the mic, but on the other side of the mic, in the guest chair, I'm very happy to say we have one of the innovative thinkers and leaders on the Oakwood University campus, Julian Waddell. He is a professor in the Department of Business. He's the executive director of the OU Launchpad, and he describes himself as an entrepreneurial ecosystem evangelist. Man, that's a mouthful. What does that mean, entrepreneurial ecosystem evangelist?
So I look at it like this. It's more so, I would say it's a little bit more than a cheerleader. So what I do is I map out the ecosystem for entrepreneurship across the community, and I basically connect all of the silos together. So in Huntsville, for example, there are 9 different entrepreneurship centers. A lot of people don't know about those entrepreneurship centers. So what I do is I basically make sure that everyone knows about the resources that are available to them in their community, how to take advantage of them, and how to be able to maximize the benefits that are out there, because there are so much, including funding, including business development opportunities, and it's something that isn't advertised. So I take it upon myself to make sure that people know about that information. And not only do I do that, I make sure that they know how to be able to become effective and efficient with it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It sounds like this is, for any entrepreneur, especially those who are just starting out, this would be much needed information, it sounds like to me. And you're an entrepreneur yourself, right?
Yes.
What's your business? What do you do?
So my company, I actually have 2 companies, but my primary company is called T.O. Guy, which means that one guy. And we provide startup support specifically from a technical standpoint. So our biggest claim to fame is helping startups scale by providing startup support from a technical standpoint.
Okay. And then you have another company.
Yes. So the other company is called Doomsday Banana.
You got to explain that.
I don't advertise that one as much, but ironically, so one of the biggest things that I've noticed is that there isn't a lot of exposure when it comes to opportunities. And so Doomsday Banana, the concept behind it is the idea of bananas and how it takes a lot of time for them to spoil. Like whether it's like you see when they start to turn brown and so on and so forth, it's that time behind there. So the idea, there was a study that said that if you keep the bananas together and do these additional things, that it would stop stop it from browning so fast. But the idea is that if you work together as a group, same thing with the banana, if you work together as a group, you're able to accomplish more. So the idea behind Doomsday Banana is working together to be able to provide exposure. So a lot of the things that I do within that company is I use things like trips to different events to be able to provide people from underrepresented communities to be able to have exposure to opportunities that they wouldn't normally have access to.
And you do this contracting with institutions or more organizations?
Organizations. So like, for instance, there's this organization, the Esports Business Summit, for instance. I went to that summit in October. I went there and I noticed that there wasn't any representation from any college students, but who they were marketing to specifically was college students, Gen Z. And it had people, organizations like Verizon, Comcast, all these different organizations trying to figure out how to do that. So one of the things that I did under that company was work with that organization to see how we can get students there. The goal being to provide them with the exposure necessary to be able to be in the room. So yes, it's a funny name, but the goal is being able to collaborate, work together, and to be able to provide exposure to opportunities that they wouldn't normally get access to.
Okay.
And using those creative ways to do that.
Now, I see that you have also done some other things. I see a name that jumps out at me, Pharrell Williams. Is that the Pharrell who's the music business producer? For those who don't know, well, I don't know if everybody in the Breathe audience will remember this song, but there was a big, huge pop hit. This was probably, was it 10 years ago? Called Happy.
Yes.
It was just positive, infectious. It was just, it was just everywhere. Happy. Well, Pharrell did that song. This is that Pharrell?
Yes.
You've consulted with that Pharrell.
So he has an organization called Black Ambition.
Okay.
And so Black Ambition is another entrepreneurship supporting organization that provides funding for underrepresented people. And in order for them to be able to provide that access, provide those resources, a lot of those individuals, they submit applications. What I do behind the scenes is I look at those applications and I basically help provide an assessment, rate them to say, okay, this is a good application. This is all the details that they put down, and this organization should move forward for the opportunity to get funding.
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. That's a major client there. And I also see that you're very involved in esports.
Yes.
Talk about that and explain to people what esports is.
So esports is competitive gaming in the video game space. But there's two avenues that I focus on with esports. Since my major background is entrepreneurship, I use esports as a pathway to help people understand and break into entrepreneurship. So like using what my background is in relation to Oakwood University, our entrepreneurship center is the OU Launchpad Entrepreneurship and Esports Center. And so we use esports to be able to teach the different tenets that are accompanied with learning about entrepreneurship. So for instance, when you play a video game and you're thinking about leveling up, or let's say, for instance, you're in a case, there's a boss that you need to be able to defeat. There's a lot of similarities that you see when you're with developing a business. It's like how to pivot, how to be able to utilize resource management, how to do all these different things, and that's where esports comes into play. And so there are a lot of different elements in esports that a person that is trying to break into entrepreneurship can learn from just being able to play those games. But on the other end, esports is a multi-billion-dollar industry. So outside of entrepreneurship by itself, there are individuals now. I recently read about the 16-year-old who played Fortnite, and he competed, and I believe he won, I think, $1.6 million. Now, the reason why I mentioned that specifically is because, like, a lot of people don't think of esports as a pathway for a career. But when you think about the whole esports ecosystem, there are people who are content creators. There are people who want to break into STEM, because it's not just about the the playing the game. It's about the developing of the game, the publishing of the game. It's all of these different elements that come into play that are part of the esports ecosystem that's important. So from that standpoint, that's my biggest focus, is being able to look at the different layers. And esports is just one of the ecosystems that I focus on.
There's a lot there, and I'm glad that you sort of expanded it out for us and for our audience, because it reminds me a lot of the music business and the media business, where you have lots of different overlapping and intertwining components that make it functional, that people don't really think about and don't realize there are career opportunities.
Yes.
So I'm glad that you expanded that out for us. Now, Breathe is a ministry. It's an extension of a ministry. It's part of a ministry. And I can imagine that there are a lot of people who are listening who are thinking, this is fascinating what this young man, Julian Waddell, is doing. But how do you navigate that, all of that, some of which clearly overlaps into or veers into arenas that Christianity is not necessarily promoted, or it doesn't play a key role in? And I'm saying Christianity, let alone Seventh-day Adventism. How do you navigate that as a Christian and a Seventh-day Adventist?
So for me, in everything that I do, I make sure that God is in the center of it. So one of the things about being an entrepreneur, when I first started, I wanted to be an entrepreneur because I wanted to be able to create the culture for my company. But outside of that, as I started to evolve, I realized that in every company that I would want to work for, I would hit that type of obstacle. So it goes back to what you were saying, what you asked me earlier in regards to being entrepreneurial ecosystem evangelist. The thing is, in order to be able to look at the full spectrum of everything that goes into entrepreneurship, instead of looking at it from a granular standpoint of these are the things that I need to do, I try to look at it as a huge picture. And so by being able to understand and see an ecosystem in every part, it also allows you to say, this is a place where I can work, where I don't have to compromise. And so that's one of the things that I focus on. It's like when I mentioned earlier the importance of like Doomsday Banana, for instance, there's a reason why I said exposure. It's like the reason why I focus on the diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility, and belonging. That right there, what a lot of people, when they think about it from a standpoint of maybe racial or something along the line. But from an Adventist standpoint, the idea is I've always wanted to be involved in all of these different things that interested me, but it didn't apply to me because there may have been some limitations because this may happen on Friday night. This might happen on Saturday. So one of the things that motivated me to start both of my companies was, how can I train people to be able to break into this industry so that they could be able to support? And that's how Teal Guy came about. How can I train people from that so they can have an opportunity? But with Doomsday Banana, how can I be able to then create those opportunities, provide exposure for those individuals, and then create a path for them to be able to navigate? So that's at the core of everything that I do. And so, yes, there are a lot of roadblocks. There are a lot of obstacles that may prevent you into breaking into industry. But if you can see the full ecosystem, then you can say, okay, but this is where I fit in, and this is where I can create change and opportunity for people like me.
I know entrepreneur. Well, let me start by saying I am an entrepreneur, but I also know other entrepreneurs and have known entrepreneurs who have, the reality is business doesn't stop.
Yes.
It's a 24/7, 365 kind of experience. And so I think it's not unusual for Seventh-day Adventist entrepreneurs to have to face the reality that some clients I mean, it's one thing if you have, let me approach it this way. It's one thing if you have a shop or something, then you can say, well, we're just not open sunset Friday to sunset Saturday, and when you make that clear to your customer base, because they know they come up to the door, they can't get in, right? But in the knowledge arena, which is really what you're talking about largely, and where I am also, you'll find that sometimes clients will reach out on Sabbath. Sometimes clients may have needs on Sabbath. What's your approach to how do you manage your clients and their expectations juxtaposed against your own value system?
So I feel like that falls into two categories. All right, so category number one, your foundation. And what I mean by the foundation, the way that I structured my business on it at its onset is these are the parameters that I will work within. So that means that how I schedule things, like a lot of the times in regards to my scheduling, I make sure that this is where those brackets of schedule, like those brackets fall into place. But then there's the other angle, which is I hear a lot of people say the ox in the ditch.
Yeah.
So it depends on the situation. For me, I haven't had to compromise within my business because a lot of the parameters of what I do, a lot of my clients know on the onset, these are the parameters that I work within. But there are, like for instance, I can say this part, and this is extremely important. My background was cybersecurity. When I used to focus a lot on cybersecurity, that's one of those things where it would be ox in the ditch situation. Whereas you have to think, and this is one of those ecosystem level thinking, you have to think about the lives that are being impacted. And in those particular cases, those are the things that, when you think about lives, not everything is life and death, but some things impact people's livelihood. Some people, in fact, impacts how people connect with other people, and it's extremely important to make sure that they are still available. So I operate within both of those arenas. But when I shifted a lot of my offerings, I made sure to shift my offerings to include things that didn't impact other people's livelihood in that way.
This is an excellent point, I think, to linger on just for a minute or two. Cybersecurity is integral to our way of life now more than ever.
Yes.
And based on what we're hearing about artificial intelligence, it's going to be even more of an issue as time goes on. So it's as essential. Cybersecurity is as essential a function, has as essential a function as the utility company does.
Yes,
is the way I'm thinking about it as I've
You're absolutely
thought
right.
about what you said. So that means even for those of us who, if you want to reduce it to this, for those of us who may miss a day at church, but we still want to have that church experience. You're at home. You're on. You got your system set up. You're looking at a stream of a service. Well, cybersecurity is a part of that.
Yes.
What enables that? So what would we do if we didn't have cybersecurity 24/7, 365? Maybe we wouldn't be able to watch some streaming services on Sabbath. I'm just throwing that out.
No, you're absolutely right. I would say back when I was heavily into cybersecurity, I was like, and this goes into my TO Guy company. I mentioned startup support and the technical aspect, but the idea of it, one of the things that I started with was cybersecurity. And the reason why that went hand in hand with startup support is that a lot of companies, when they were starting up their company, they would focus purely on the idea, focusing on the scaling aspect, but cybersecurity was an afterthought. And you would see individuals when they started their company, they would say, okay, I'm not going to even buy my domain name because it's not important. So you would have, I would say, davidperson@gmail, even though your website is would be davidperson.com. And a person could then buy your domain, pretend to be you, and they would seem more legitimate than you because you're utilizing a free email service. And so the idea from that standpoint of focusing on cybersecurity as you're developing your business, it becomes key. And just as you mentioned, it needs to be integral in everything that you set up because it's foundational. And so that's been one of the things that I advocate for. I don't do it as much anymore, but it's something that is extremely important when you're starting your business.
Well, that was part one of my conversation with Julian Waddell. Really fascinating young man who is doing some great work in education and in the entrepreneurial space. You're going to want to join us for part 2 of this conversation, which will happen in our next episode of Breathe. I'm David Person. God bless you. And on behalf of the vacationing Pastor Julian Snell, we'll see you next time on Breathe. Don't forget, no matter how challenging life may be, you can always stop, pray, and breathe.
Breathe is produced by David Person for Breath of Life. Christian Lawson and Damian Malone provide production assistance. The opening theme was produced by David Person and James Bowman. James Bowman and Kelvin Wooten produced the closing theme. Special thanks to our broadcast partner, WJOU-FM Oakwood University Radio. Episodes of Breathe can be found on your favorite podcasting platforms. Please like them and share. Until next time, when life gets difficult, don't forget to breathe.